John, let's start, if we may, with your old club, Celtic. Obviously, tumultuous times and kind of tumultuous scenes outside Celtic Park. What do you make of the whole thing?
Well, it's unfortunate because everything that Neil Lennon has done there over the years, I think he deserves a bit more time, a bit more respect. But I think that the 10 in a row fever is getting everybody excited. The fact they went out to the cup as well, and it reminds me of the old days when Celtic and Rangers were similar clubs in terms of not stature, because Rangers is obviously a huge club, but in terms of results, performances, they can both, you know, compete with each other on a level playing field. This is when, if one team is doing better than the other, this happens. Obviously, in the last 9 years when Rangers got relegated, I think that the expectations from Glasgow Rangers, the realistic expectations, were more realistic, if you like, and therefore they accepted the fact that Celtic were going to be the better team for a few years. When Rangers first got back up into the Scottish Premier League, I think they then became unrealistic, those Rangers expectations, and they fired three managers because they weren't able to compete with Celtic. I think when Steven Gerrard went, they then said, okay, well, we're going to give him time because we don't expect Steven Gerrard to win the league straight away. So they gave him 1 year, the second year, and now you can see they're fairly even. Unfortunately for Celtic, it's now gone the other way. The fact that because they aren't winning, and of course they shouldn't be losing the games they're losing, but the fact that Rangers have now put them under this pressure, you can see the scenes outside Celtic Park. So it's unfortunate because Celtic can go on to win the next 10 games. But the harmony has to be right, the togetherness has to be right, and unfortunately that doesn't seem to be the case.
Do you think it's, from your experience, is it fixable for Neil Lennon now, or does this become a bit of a snowball, particularly in Glasgow?
It's fixable if everybody concerned, and I'm not talking about necessarily the fans. Yes, we want the fans to be behind them, but if everybody in the club, meaning the players, the hierarchy, all pull together, because if the players are still on Neil Lennon's side, they will win football matches. If they believe in Neil Lennon, they'll win football matches. But a feature of modern football, not just at Celtic, is that when things go wrong and the manager gets the blame, players absolve themselves of responsibility. And because they know subconsciously that if we don't perform, we are not going to get the blame. That's when I say a feature of modern football, that has really been in the last 10, 15 years of players not taking responsibility when the manager gets the blame all the time. So it's fixable, but it's really down to the players as to whether they still believe in Neil Lennon and they believe that it's wrong for the fans just to blame him. They're going to take responsibility. Then, of course, it's fixable.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, a couple of wins that always helps. But do you think if the club came out and said, "Look, Neil's our manager for the time being. We support him," that would buy him a bit more time and space?
Well, if the players believe it, because no matter what the club says, if the players don't go out there and perform, because regardless of whether Neil Lennon is manager or not, they should be winning football matches in Scotland. So, I'm not going to say that they don't need a manager, but if you look at the players that they actually have, they should be beating these teams. And if the players go and perform, regardless of what the hierarchy say, even if the hierarchy says, well, we're reviewing that situation, but the players are behind Neil Lennon and they go out and they perform, then things will turn around. So it's completely 100% down to the players because they have the players there to do better than they are. And Neil Lennon all of a sudden hasn't become a bad manager. So, it is a reversible, the situation, but I think it really is down to the players. Because Neil Lennon isn't going to do anything different than he's done when they won the treble and when they did, whatever they did in previous years. So, the players have to take responsibility.
Yeah. In some ways, he's a victim of his own success, then, isn't he? Because the standards now for him and that club are almost unattainably high every season.
Yes, they are. And you can say he's a victim of his own success. However, they aren't asking in terms of the performances and the results. They're not asking for something that they can't achieve. And they're not asking to win every game. But if you look at what's happened in the last 4, 5, 6 games, that, of course, is unacceptable in terms of what they are able to achieve. So I don't think they're saying that because we aren't winning every game is the reason why you're under pressure. But if you look at the ways they're losing and the games they're losing, that's why he's under pressure.
I presume this has, for you, echoes of the end of your time there, does it? Or not?
It does, but mine came much quicker than this because if you look and analyse when I left Celtic, I had won the Manager of the Month in January, which I presume means that after Christmas when we had our lockdown, when we came back, we were fairly successful for me to win Manager of the Month. And then I was sacked 2 games later. So it happened quite quickly. Whereas this has been going on for quite a while with Neil Lennon. And I suppose it's a lot to do with the last 2 months in terms of what's happened. But you have to also look at the situation with COVID. There are no fans in the stadium. You can see Aston Villa beating Liverpool 7-2. You can look at results that Arsenal are having. I think in this time, you're going to get strange results because this is an unusual time for everybody. Playing in front of a crowd at Celtic Park where you're going to be under pressure to perform, and maybe you do perform. Playing in front of nobody when the opposition aren't intimidated because there's no crowd there. So I think that I wouldn't like to judge him in this period, because I wouldn't like to judge any manager in this period because it's such an unusual time and nobody's used to what's happening. So I would still say, put it this way: if Neil Lennon stays and we get to January, February, I would be very surprised if having hopefully won the 2 games in hand, that Celtic weren't back on track.
Interesting. I suppose, as you touched on, really the biggest problem in some ways for Neil is Steven, isn't it? Is what Rangers are doing, because inevitably the comparisons are always there every day, every week. And if Rangers are doing well and Celtic are doing slightly less well, that balance of power shifts. That's what gets everybody in a green and white shirts back up.
Well, that's always been the case, even from when I was there, because Rangers had won the league the year before. Celtic won it 2 years earlier. And of course, but interestingly, when I went to Celtic, I thought it was an accident waiting to happen in terms of my time there. Because in the first 13 games, you'd won 11, drawn 1, and lost 1 in the first 13 before Henrik Larsson broke his leg. But I was still getting criticised. I was still getting a lot of abuse. And we had won 11 games out of 13. And we'd scored lots of goals. And I thought to myself, well, if I all of a sudden go through a sticky patch, it's going to be horrendous. And that had more to do with the fact that Rangers had won all the games. So had I done what I did, but Rangers lost 3 or 4 games as well, then maybe that wouldn't be as apparent. And as you rightly say, the fact that Celtic are where they are, but also Rangers have done what they did, because Celtic could have had the exact same results, but Rangers would have lost 3 or 4 games and, maybe been 2 points ahead, 3 points ahead with 2 games in hand. Rangers could have been out of Europe as well. And the pressure wouldn't have been as strong as it is now. And I'm sure the fans would have, of course, they wouldn't have been happy in terms of losing results, but it's really to do with how well the opposition are playing that determines how you feel.
How well do you think Steven Gerrard is doing at Rangers? And is this the kind of perfect trajectory for his early managerial career?
I think what this has shown is that if you have belief and support a manager, because in his first year they didn't come anywhere near winning the league, and I suppose managers of the past, you look at Rangers managers of the past, namely the 2 or 3 managers before Steven, the fact that they hadn't got closer to Celtic meant that they were only given 1 year, in fact less, and they sacked them. Whereas with Steven, they said it doesn't matter whether we win, how close we get to Celtic. We believe in this project. We believe in Steven. We believe in the situation. The second year, they got closer. And here, with that belief that they actually have, you can see how good they are in terms of the players they're now getting and how competitive they are. So Steven's done absolutely an incredible job. However, they have supported him in trusting him, even when things didn't start off particularly well. It started off as well as could be expected. When Steven Gerrard first went there, as with the previous managers, shouldn't have been getting anywhere near competing with Celtic anyway. But because they accepted the fact that this is a project we believe in, and as much as we're not going to get close to Celtic, we're going to stick with it, and you can see the fruition of that. And that is a lesson to any club, who gets a manager and they believe in him and give him time and support. Because what that then does is that shows the players that this manager is the manager we believe in, regardless of whether you perform or not. And if you don't perform, we're going to change you. We're not going to change the manager. Whereas I think that in other clubs, and maybe even Celtic, it's a situation now where we think the solution is to change the manager.
Yeah. While we're on Steven, and I know this is a big leap forward, is it possible, do you think, if the stars align, to go directly from Ibrox to Anfield as manager?
Well, not if Celtic catch them and they finish 3, 4, 5 points behind Celtic. So if we say the stars aligns, which means that he's going to go on and win the league and Rangers and do the treble or do the double or whatever he does, then that's a possibility. But once again, that's the same for any manager. Steven isn't any different to anybody else. And it also doesn't mean that if they don't win the league, that he's not good enough to come and manage Liverpool either. As to whether it'll be straight from Glasgow Rangers to Liverpool, particularly as Jurgen Klopp is still there, and we don't know how Jurgen Klopp is going to be there for. So if you assume that Jurgen Klopp leaves today and Steven Gerrard is doing what he's doing today, is he going to go to Rangers? If Jurgen Klopp stays on for 2 more years, and then next year, as much as Rangers may win the league this year, next year Rangers finish second and don't do anything, is Steven going to be the man to go to? So in football, unfortunately, it's just what happens at the moment. But I'm sure that Steven has the qualities further down the line to manage Liverpool. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's always a bit of timing, isn't there? But yeah, but sooner or later you'd like to think that timing would be right. What about Jurgen at the moment? I mean, obviously he's not a manager under pressure as such, but he's having an uncomfortable time with injuries and a few battles with the media.
Well, with most managers, when if you have the perception that things are going against you and things are being unfair, you will then react in that way. Jose Mourinho did the same at Chelsea when everything was rosy to begin with. And things are still rosy at Liverpool, don't get me wrong, of course, because we're still top of the league to all intents and purposes in terms of points. But the injury situation is what it is. The squads are big enough now to cope with that. I suppose other clubs have injuries as well, and everyone's after an advantage for their own particular club in terms of talking about scheduling and programming and how many games you play after Europe, and every manager does that. But he has faith in his squad, and as he's shown when he has to pick young players or so-called second string players or reserve players. So I have no fears for Liverpool being competitive in every game they play and in every competition they're in.
Yeah, you do need a massive squad now, though, don't you?
Well, you do need a massive squad, but it depends on what you consider the squad to be. Do you need 25 international world-class players? Liverpool have shown that you don't need that, because when they put the kids in, or the reserves, if you like, they still have been competitive and won matches. Now, not to say you can put them in for 2, 3, 4 months and still be at the top of the league, but if normally you talk about everything balancing itself out, whereby players are going to get injured for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and a couple of kids have to come in every now and again, they're able to cope with that. If you're saying, can you miss your 4 or 5 of your top players for 3, 4 months, then no team can do that. But I don't think that's going to be the case for anybody. Virgil is obviously missing, but apart from Virgil and the injuries we have, I'm sure aren't long-term injuries who can be covered for a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean it is a uniquely challenging season, I guess, isn't it, for every player, every manager? Obviously, you had different challenges as a player physically because of the pitches and some of the tackling and so on. But I think at the moment it is relentless, isn't it?
It is, but I think that the biggest problem is that a lot of clubs have got, like you talk about ourselves, and maybe Phil Neal went 6 years without missing one game, and I'm sure he would have had a little knock on an injury between them, but he played on. Whereas now, because all these clubs have such big squads with a lot of world-class players, if you like, or first-team players, then you can't afford to miss yours, because other people can bring other first-team players in and still be as competitive. Whereas in the old days, that wasn't the case. But I think Liverpool is better placed than any other team in the country to lose big players or a lot of players and still perform, because Jurgen Klopp doesn't make excuses. As much as he may complain about the fixtures and he wants them to be fit, he doesn't say that to his players. He doesn't use as an excuse on the training field when they're going to play, and a lot of managers do, and that goes on to the training field, that goes on to the pitch when the players are feeling we're missing big players. Liverpool don't do that. After he may complain and say that we're missing players, and as he has done, but I'm sure Monday to Friday that won't be an issue with Jurgen, that Van Dijk and these people are missing, because if you give those players an excuse, albeit subconsciously, that we're missing our big players, you will not get results. And I think Liverpool over the last couple of years have shown that when the chips are down and they miss big players, they still perform, because that's what he demands from them.
To come back then finally to where we started, it sounds like for all that we look from the outside into Liverpool, Celtic, Rangers, whatever, it's what's happening inside Celtic right now that is key. If the players are still with Neil, then there's a route out of this. If they're not, then the board need to know that, and that will decide what happens next.
Yeah, but I think the players are still with him. I mean, things aren't going well because of the lack of confidence. I think the difference between myself and Neil is that obviously Neil has got a better record of success historically, which means that he will be given more time. But secondly, I think that with myself, as I mentioned, in the first 13 games when things were going well, I still felt, and I remember saying to my ex-wife at the time, that I stopped looking at houses, because I really felt it was an accident waiting to happen, because I knew that if we aren't able to continue this, I'm not going to last, even when things were going well. The difference with Neil is that I think that because things have gone so well in the past, that when all of a sudden, as I expect them to, in the next 3, 4, 5, 6 games, for them to pick up points, I don't think that it's going to get to the situation whereby if they win the next 5, 6, 7 games, then they lose 1 or 2. It's then going to go back to the negativity of like, he's the right man for the job. Whereas with me, no matter, as I said, when I'm at one manager of the month in January, 2 games later, I was sacked. But had I not been sacked, and had I, won 4 or 5 games, then come March, I've lost 1 or 2 games, that question mark would always have been there. But I don't think that's the situation with Neil. I don't think the situation is that if he wins, I expect them to the next 6-7 games, then all of a sudden they lose 1 or 2, that it's going to be, is he the man for the job? Yes, he is. No, he isn't. Yes, he is. No, he isn't. I think that if he gets through this sticky period, then I think that his job will be secure.
Always fascinating, mate. Really appreciate your thoughts and your time. Great stuff.
Pleasure.